All right. Welcome back. Long time no see.
I know, long time no see.
All right. So let's just dive in and explain to me the process of wanting to work in sports media.
Well, sports is something I always had a passion for. I think, like you, we were raised around sports, raised around watching West Virginia University my entire life, every Saturday since probably the time I was born. I remember, I think my first day of kindergarten was a West Virginia shirt. So I think sports was always meant to be for me. I was always playing sports, baseball, soccer, golf, running for a little bit until I realized that running's not the type of exercise I enjoy like my father does. But I always loved sports. It's pretty much every day. Instead of watching cartoons, I was in my bouncer watching Sports Center. That is not a joke at all. At 2 and 3 years old, I was there watching Stuart Scott and Chris Berman and Scott Van Pelt every day, and sports was always my thing. But it's kind of funny. I never thought of a career in sports. I always thought, hey, my dad's in finance. Why don't I get into finance? Then I realized, this isn't really a career path I want to do. Math's not really my thing, but I actually enjoy that. So my dad, I think it was freshman year of high school. I remember I was waiting actually for a tutoring session for math, which should explain math probably isn't the thing I should work in. Was what about sports writing? What about working in sports media? So I was like, hey, this could really be something. I started writing stories for him for fun, just articles for him about when Bryce Harper and Mike Trout came into the league. I remember when there was that debate going on in 2012, I think is when it was, when they first made their debuts. But then I realized that this is really what I wanted to do, and covering sports is, and it's really not a job most days because you're at stadiums, you're at basketball arenas, you're at baseball fields, tracks. I mean, there's a lot worse days, and sure, maybe some of the hours might be nights or weekends, but there could be a much worse Saturday than being at a Big 12 football game, as we've seen in Morgantown at West Virginia when Texas is in town, Oklahoma State's in town, or Oklahoma, whomever it is in town. So I just knew that sports media was a real passion of mine, and it's not a bad thing to work 60 hours a week sometimes covering sports because you're around sports. It's what I've watched my entire life, and I've always loved working in sports. Sports media was always fun, just watching Sports Center every single day, reading. When the Mercury News came out, they had like four different columnists writing stories about the Warriors or the Raiders or the A's, and I had to read that every day. Or you'd have the I was always stoked for the Thursday high school sports section on the features about high school kids, and I was hoping, heck, maybe we see one of my high school's kids in there sometime. But sports media was, ever since freshman year of high school started, was something I always really wanted to do. And then once I went to college with you, we were both heavily involved with stuff, and that's, I think, when both of our passions and loves really grew for it.
Yeah. How did you decide that sports writing was the avenue that you wanted to go down? Because I mean, WVU had so many opportunities to do broadcast or radio or work in front of or behind the camera. So how did you land on the writing aspect?
So it was funny. There was actually a time freshman year of high school in English where we had each had to write an article. It was, I think, the teacher, I forgot what exactly the background information was, but she told us to write an article, which was different, but it was actually a really good learning experience. And after I wrote it, she was like, "This is an avenue you should really take." She wrote something really long, like, I think media writing, news writing, that sort of stuff is really something I think that would be right up your alley. I think that's a great career path, and you've definitely got a talent for it. And I was like, hey, okay, that could be something. And I started covering high school sports in high school, had my own little site for fun, doing that stuff locally, and it always grew. But once I got to college, I was still, maybe broadcasting's kind of what I want to do, but maybe writing. But as I got more involved with the DA, I fell in love because I was doing soccer for a little bit, doing then men's basketball, and just writing, doing, I love doing those longer feature stories too, as I'm sure everybody probably got to notice when I was in college, right? I just fell in love with the writing part. And I think about midway through freshman year, that's when I was kind of sold on, this is really what I love. I loved writing. I started interning for West Virginia Illustrated to write when Chuck Scatterday was there, and he brought me on as an intern. And I really just loved doing those features and recaps for them as well. And being an editor at the DA was a great time. And as that kept going on with traveling, covering games, writing, and all of that stuff, and just being able to interview athletes and coaches was a passion of mine. And I still loved broadcasting. I loved doing some of the radio stuff, like U92 was a blast. Just hosting a show, whether it was with like Ryan Alexander and Pat Kotnick when we had our weekly show, that was always really fun. Or broadcasting some baseball as a color guy was a lot of fun too. But writing was just I don't know, there was something about it. I loved being able to just go through that entire process of getting interviews, having to transcribe everything for an hour or two after, and then figuring out finding little things through quotes that I'm like, hey, this could be a really good story for now. And hey, maybe I found something really cool. Like, remember one time, I think I was talking to Tyron Carrier back when he was West Virginia's receivers coach, and now he's at Houston, I think, still with Dana over there. But he mentioned something about they had like some 3 a.m. group text one week after they lost to, I think, Oklahoma State is, I believe, what it was. And David Sills and Gary Jennings and all of those guys were just, obviously, they weren't happy that they lost that game there against Oklahoma State. I remember that, but they had like a 3 a.m. group text. I'm like, this is interesting. Okay, I'm gonna really pinpoint this and try to make a feature out of this and talk to David and talk to Gary and be like, what happened with that? Why did you guys do that group text at 3 in the morning when you already have little to no time to sleep as a student athlete, right? With the school schedule and training and study hall and even just a little bit of a social life and football practice all the time and film sessions, and wonder why they decided to do that 3 a.m. What went on, how that inspired them. I think the next game, both of them went for 100 plus yards.
So, when you're brainstorming feature ideas, are they more external things that these student athletes have done, or are you talking about potentially mental health issues or performance issues?
A little bit of both, I would say. A lot of it too, sure. It's great to talk about the success or things people are doing on the field, right? But there's so much more to being a student athlete than just being the athlete, right? There's a reason why we put student as that first word. So it's mentioning what kids might be doing off the football field, off the softball diamonds, whatever it is, whether that's, I know we talked to one soccer player a couple months ago. She started doing a lot of clothing drives and volunteering at her local church and food drives to help out people in need. Now I know she signed her letter of intent to play women's soccer at the University of California, Berkeley. And so that was a really good story to see. You just kind of talk to people and find out what are some cool background stories. But also now too, mental health is really important because right, we're in a pandemic. We've been in this thing for 11 months. When I think 11 months ago is when all of a sudden you had those conference tournaments, the NCAA tournament for college basketball. Next thing you know, that shut down. The NBA shut down. Everyone's in quarantine for a while. And out here, California didn't have high school sports. We just got the go ahead to where things could have, for football and stuff, could have resumed today. But now is the first day for pads for football. I was at a tennis match yesterday, and I can see at least going out helped kids' mental health a ton. But it's something we really have to focus on because there's been a lot of kids that have struggled. Unfortunately, we've seen kids take their own life because they didn't have sports or just that avenue with going in school in person. Or there was unfortunately a kid in Oakland. He was a great football player, but as sports kept getting pushed back and further back, he just got involved with the wrong crowds and things started to happen. And but as soon as he started to turn the corner, getting back to, hey, I really need sports. I want to get back involved with the stuff. And it's hard, especially when there's no sports and education. It's going to be hard to have any motivation to do anything. And you're just going to go outside and who knows what's going to happen, right? Who knows who's going to try to get you into their corner. And this kid, unfortunately, as things turned the corner, he got to wanting to be a captain again. And when they get involved with the football team, unfortunately, he got shot 17 times innocently and his own life was taken. And then there's a situation in Richmond as well. I know there was last week when we talked, actually right in that moment, I remember we found out high school sports are back in California, but we talked to a coach on our podcast the other day. They were happy that they got the green light to play again, but one of their receivers was missing. They found that out not too long after because he was last seen on the San Rafael Bridge and he's missing. So there's a lot of mental health things we've got to focus on too and help people out. I've got my own mental health stuff. Everybody does, right? Especially now. How could you not have some stuff you've got to work on? But it's a matter of bringing on people. For us, we've had someone came on around Christmas time too, because I know the holidays are a big mental health time, especially now. It's just mental health, taking care of yourself up in the mind and the brain and going through, hey, here's some tips and pointers that could really help you guys, help you kids. Just keep your minds going, whether that's just taking 30 minutes to yourself and just tuning out your phone, the world. Because sure, all of our lives are on our phones now, but you need that time away from your phone and social media because as great as social media can be, it can be really toxic too. And so can the world. You just need time to yourself and find maybe a book to read, a movie to watch, a new TV show to watch for a little bit. You watch a couple episodes a day, or just a workout plan, whatever it is, because I know working out's always been something that's kind of kept my mind right, especially when the gyms are open. That's always something that's helped me mentally. I know that's something that helps kids too, and they've worked with just being mentors for a lot of student athletes, especially right in these times where there wasn't sports. So they're helping kids just at least stay on top of their academics, because I know it's hard to be motivated when you're going to class on Zoom for 4 hours a day and you're stuck in your bedroom, and then there's no practice after school. So all day you're stuck in your bedroom. You can't really go outside. You're not getting sunlight on you. You're not getting fresh air. And that's just exhausting when you're in that same little bubble day after day after day, taking classes on Zoom, and really everything's different and your whole world's kind of, especially at 16, 17 years old, that's supposed to be your social years and going through college, and instead that's been stripped. So it's just about a lot of mental health, bringing on the right people to talk to us on podcasts about that, and how coaches are helping kids, and academic advisors that we're actually featuring tomorrow, how she's really helped kids because she's been through her own mental health struggles. She went to us just talking about depression, things that she suffered through her life, but now she's really gotten the help that she needed and really sought, and now she's doing great things for kids, and she's helping a lot of student athletes that she works with bump their GPAs up from 2.5s to now like 3.5s, which is remarkable jumps in anything. And there's kids that she's worked with. So I know she's a high school teacher in Vallejo as well. She's a high school teacher. She also is an academic advisor for numerous high schools and 7-on-7 and training programs. But she's a high school teacher, and she's heard those kids talk about. She heard one kid say that he was tired of going to funerals because they kept having kids lose their lives to gun violence and things like that. And one kid said that they're like, how come you didn't go Saturday to the funeral? He's like, I can't go to these things anymore. It's exhausting. It's the same thing all the time. So she's helping kids just because she's been through a lot of things too. She mentioned she's been through 3 miscarriages before she had her daughters. She went through depression. She's been through so much. She just lost her mother 10 months ago, but then 12 hours later, when she interviewed for that high school job she has now, she got the job. She doesn't remember a single thing, but she got it. So you see the strength that she has, and just the story she tells to help out kids, and kids she's worked with, things that they've been through. There's a lot of people in your corner, and we're trying to help bring people just utilize their talents, their skill levels, their life stories through our platform and help out kids. Because at the end of the day, it's about helping kids and helping people. There's a lot of negativity in this world, but it's about showing the positivity and what people are doing in that.
So what do
Hey,
you think how do you think that sports psychology is perceived in the media, and what role does social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram play in perpetuating either a positive narrative or a taboo kind of negative narrative around these athletes coming out on their personal platforms and talking about these experiences?
that's a really good question, because 5, 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't see sports psychology as much in the media, at least from my vantage point and my viewpoint. But I think nowadays you're seeing that more and more, especially with Players Tribune really growing. You're seeing more athletes come out about just their mental health, their sports. Like Kevin Love, I remember he had that game in the Cavs a couple years ago. I want to say when he had an anxiety attack, his heart started racing on the bench and he had to leave. And he had no problem telling that story and sharing that, right? So now the media is also understanding this, especially when it comes to football, with concussions and CTEs been even more prevalent the last 5 to 10 years as well, to share these stories and show that sports psych is a really important thing. I know you've studied sports psych. You understand how important that is, especially, and you've got the media background too, so you know how those things too mesh and can go hand in hand in so many situations. And I think media coverage of that's improving in a lot of ways. It's probably not exactly where we want it to be yet, because it also depends on how maybe certain reporters are going into stories and what they're trying to get out of it and whatnot. But I think I'm seeing a lot of outlets do a better job at reporting that stuff, going through, talking to different athletes. And I think the Players Tribune, just having an outlet that just has athletes say it in their own exact words, like Kevin Love did and some other athletes have done, is really beneficial, because probably the Players Tribune's a really good outlet that they're going to be most comfortable to share, because they're sharing their entire story in their own writing, their own words, their own videos. And that's great. And I'm starting to see more outlets, especially social media. I'm seeing a lot more sports psych stuff being posted. I'm seeing Coach Kurt Hines. I think we spoke, just the two of us, last week a little bit about him, but
Yeah.
Coronado high school football coach down in San Diego, he posts a lot of just sports like mental health stuff. He's always really open about that. Some other coaches are doing great stuff with that. I'm following more of those kinds of accounts as well on Instagram and Twitter. I think that's really important. But I think you're seeing that stigma kind of die down about mental health, because I think, what was it, West Virginia's basketball page, I want to say this morning when I woke up, posted something about mental health awareness as well. And I think every
Oh,
player,
really?
yeah, that was this morning. I saw like Deuce McBride and Senny Njai and a lot of their players and Isaiah Cottrell were just talking about mental health awareness and just how they take some time out of their day for themselves and just relax after such a long day, and being a student athlete where that schedule's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. most days. And then you got to repeat that process all over again the next day for 4 more days or 5 more days out of the week. And then you've got games on top of that too. But I think you're seeing that stigma really die down of not talking about mental health and sports. Like now, a lot of people are very open about that. I'm very open about things I've struggled with, been through. I was diagnosed with like mild anxiety a few weeks ago, and I take some stuff for that. Everybody's got something, right? There's nothing wrong with talking about that stuff and mentioning it and pinpointing ways that we can improve and just ways to help everybody out. And sports like something that's really grown. I know ESPN's featured more of that stuff. Sunday NFL Countdown. We're watching stuff about that. I think every week, I want to say during the NFL season, they were featuring kind of a story about that stuff. College Game Day shows some stuff, especially when Tom Rinaldi was doing a lot of their stories. And you know how much I love Tom Rinaldi and the
I
stories
love
that,
Tom Rinaldi too.
yeah, right, exactly. We've talked about him for years, but I think on a lot of these shows, you're seeing more of those stories really come out.
So, how do you think that the media can improve on the coverage of these mental health and also mental performance stories and features that they already are starting to do more of?
That's another really good question. I think it's a matter of just improving in terms of just going into every story. And I think this could go with almost any venture of media, going into the story with a really open mind and not just going into it with the story's got to come out like this, or it's got to come out with there's certain stuff about mental health, or this answer about mental health. Go into it with an open mind, go into it with, so you can go this direction or this direction. Have your basic questions, of course. You got to have your 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, basic questions. Depends on the length of the story you're supposed to be getting from your editor, but you got to go into it with an open mind and just learn and hear what they're saying. If it goes on a different track, take it on a different track, because that's the way the story's going, the way the interview's going. You can't force something with the story. That's not how it works, or else that's not going to be a good story. And you see that a lot of times where people go into a story with just one goal in mind, and that's not actual reporting, and that's not the journalism we were taught. You got to have that open mind and go through it with both angles. Maybe there's 5 angles, maybe there's 10, I don't know, but every story is different. But you got to go into it with a really open mind. And if this thing takes a different direction, talking to, if it's an expert about that field, if it's a sports psych expert, if it goes in a different direction than you thought, great. That's a different kind of story than you thought, but that's a good story. That's a different story, but that maybe that's a different story that hasn't been told, that someone could really use. Even if it's just one viewer could really use that, that's invaluable. And I think it's going into more of it with an open mind. And some of that's from the top too. Just maybe that's an editorial thing, a producer thing, whatever it is. They're saying you've got to come out with this with this. Maybe that's not on the reporter, but I think from the top to the bottom, everywhere in between, you've got to have the open mind going into every single story, especially when it comes to this.
So, how do you think that mental health stories, like the features that we've been talking about, how do you think that the narrative shifts based on either the sport that's being mentioned or the gender of the athlete potentially? How do you think that the story is potentially manipulated based on what the what the athlete is going through based on their sport?
I think some of it has to be, with some sports, it might just have to be a quote unquote toughness thing, right? Maybe in football or something like that, you've got to be mentally and physically strong because it's football. You're getting hit, you're getting beat up all the time, and I don't think that's the way it really should be, especially when you see the concussions and things that are coming out every single week, the hard hits. I mean, what was it, Clint Trickett at West Virginia? How many concussions did he have in college before he had to retire before the bowl game his senior year? And when they played A&M in that Liberty Bowl, right? I mean, it's with different sports and all of that, it's a different viewpoint and stigma from it. But at least from media coverage of football, I'm seeing better things with that. Basketball is very open about that stuff. I will say, especially the NBA does a fantastic job opening up. The WNBA also does a fantastic job opening up about this. Both the professional basketball leagues like that, WNBA, NBA, they're very open about that stuff. I'm seeing athletes open up and share their stories all the time. I've seen LeBron's open up about stuff, right? And Kobe in his career before he passed away last year was opening up about stuff throughout his time and the league and childhood, whatever it was. LeBron's open up about that. You're seeing, like I mentioned, Kevin Love's a prime example of that anxiety attack mid-game and he had to leave. That's another great storyline and how he got through that. I think basketball especially is just a medium in a sport where they're very open about these things. It's very player friendly, right? And I think that's a great thing too, where players have a lot of power and a lot of control because they're the ones helping bring in a lot of money, of course, for the business, but more importantly, you're understanding who they are as people. And they're going to be very open. I know Warriors players are very open, Lakers players are open, Spurs players are pretty open as well. I mean, every single organization, you're seeing a lot of players open up about that. Media coverage is really open up about stuff. The Athletic does a fantastic job about stories, especially I know just being a Bay Area person, I read some of their stories, just Marcus Thompson, what he writes about some of these players and their life stories and their struggles, how they've kind of gone through some of that to maybe their father passing away when they were young to all of a sudden being in the G League. And then Steph Curry gets hurt for a little bit. Quinn Cook comes into the league and then hits some shots. All of a sudden, he's an NBA champion, and there he is holding the NBA trophy and absolutely bawling his eyes out because this wasn't supposed to happen to him with everything. But he had his own mental health struggles, and I think that basketball is a sport that does a great job. Football's starting to get there. I've seen a lot of soccer players really open up too. Soccer's a great sport where I've seen a lot of mental health stuff really be brought up. Baseball, I'm starting to see some of that too, but basketball, especially in soccer, a lot of times too, I'm really seeing those sports do a great job just discussing mental health and sports psychology and intertwining that with the game and talking about how important that is and having professionals on site or whatever that is to really help you get through these times and share your stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the outlets that you've talked about, I mean, obviously you and I talked about the Players Tribune in our pre-interview and how impactful that kind of platform is to these athletes. So when we're talking about, but in that sense, we're talking about athletes who are writing for themselves. How do you think that once they have passed away and then are being diagnosed with CTE, and then the media is trying to figure out how to cover that when it may not have been as obvious while they were alive? Do you think the media is doing enough to make that as important a topic as it should be? And if not, what do you think that they can do?
I think in some instances they make it very important, but we're also in a society now, right, where it's like, what's the latest news? What's the news of today? And all of a sudden, yesterday's news is yesterday's news, but it might be very, very important, especially to a lot of people, especially if that's something that's very dear to their heart, whether it's local news or national news. And I think it's something we got to stay on top of every single day. Doing a great job staying on top of coronavirus numbers. And obviously we have to because this is something that's going to determine when we can open back up and live at least somewhat normal again and have more things come back and have fans in stands and be able to go to work safely and everybody can go back to schools in a safe manner, right? But I think we've got to do something where once we mention something about CTE and someone's just mental health struggles before they unfortunately passed away and keep that story going and keep updating that instead of saying that it's yesterday's news. Sure, it might be yesterday's news because it was yesterday, but to a lot of people, it's not just yesterday's news. There's a family that wants to learn more about it. There's people, there's loved ones, there's friends, there's fans of that person that idolize them. There's their girlfriend, their wife, husband, whomever it was, their kids. They want to know what happened, and the media is going to be a big outlet for them to learn more about that and kind of help them through and tell their story. And we've got to keep that process going. We can't just say, hey, we've got a little bit of information, we've got that news for today. Okay, now tomorrow's a different day. No, tomorrow might be a different day. Numbers wise, maybe it's a different month, but that story still lives on. There's more we have to tell. Every story's got more to tell. Until we pinpointed every single thing about that story, we haven't finished it. And I think we get stuck into a process with the news now. It's got to be, what's the headline now? What's the headline now? Especially with social media growing, you're seeing aggregated news, which a lot of people just read the headline and that's it. No, we've got to get it back to, it's not just today's headline or yesterday's headline, it's tomorrow's story too, and the next days. And how do we keep growing on the story and learning more and updating the story as time goes on instead of just finishing one day? And that's something probably from the top that's got to change too, editorial wise and whatnot. But it's obviously it's gotten a lot better, but there's still a lot of work to improve. And I think it's that, just staying consistent with it and not just saying just because today is over, we've got that story out that it's over, because to a lot of people that who that's really dear to, it's not. There's a lot of people I can learn from that story too.
Yeah, I mean, these are real lives.
Yeah.
Like, and if it's not a family that's trying to grieve for a loved one that's passed away, it's something like what's happening with the USA Gymnastics team right now, where these these men took full advantage of these young girls during a time when they were not only vulnerable but trying to implement what these coaches were telling them. And so when all of this media comes out about situations like the Larry Nassar case, it's almost there and then gone. I mean, there's really no time to even let it sink in before something else is coming, something else new is trending.
I know exactly. You see that a lot, I think. And there's a lot of news stories, unfortunately with that. And then you're seeing that with what Flint, Michigan, without water for how long, right? But it was maybe a story for a day, but we're forgetting there's not water. What are people supposed to do? And there was those stories in Texas and West Virginia when a lot of people had no power and were going through tough weather things. And if they had another couple of days, a lot of people were unfortunately going to pass away because they didn't have water, food, and all of that. And that may have been just a national story for an hour, but that's important. What are ways that the public and other states can help better the lives of these people and help them? If there's a way that somehow we can get food to them, get water to them, anything, somehow rescue them and get them into a place safely, even if that's just inside a basketball arena, a local church, whatever it is, where they can just have access to a heater, especially when it's freezing and it's 15 degrees and it's snowing and your heater's not working, you've got no food, you can't make hot chocolate or coffee, you can't make anything, you can't even drink water, for goodness sakes. We've got to keep that consistent and just realize, just because something's new is trending on Twitter or whatever, that there's still important things that are going on in the world, like Flint, Michigan's thing with water, or you mentioned USA Gymnastics. There's so many stories that we just let sink in the past, unfortunately, and they're still very important to people. And these are lives. These are lives at stake. It's sure it might just be quote unquote a headline or a story, but trust me, there's a lot of lives and a lot of people's livelihoods and careers at stake and on the line, kids' lives on the line, their futures on the line, and then we just forget about these stories in 2 hours. Unfortunately, there's got to be better ways to keep the stories going, because USA Gymnastics, we heard about that once, and I don't think I've seen anything about that for a long time. I haven't seen anything about that on social media or anywhere, any news outlet for a while, since I think the story first broke.
Yeah, I mean, there was just an update yesterday because one of their lead witnesses killed himself. And he was a huge piece in the entire scandal that Nasser perpetuated, and now he's gone. And so I saw this comment on Twitter, and it was like, there's no better way to prove you're guilty than to take yourself out of the equation. I mean, like, that's horrendous. And that story, as enormous as it is, and the implications that will forever live on in the traumatic memories of these young girls who are now trying to become young women and participate in society. I mean, how are we helping them as a media entity to tell these stories for them?
Yeah, that we've got to make sure that we tell the story and find ways to help, because you're going through a traumatic experience at any age, right? That's going to take a toll forever, but especially at a young age. what are going to be the mental health implications of that? I don't even want to know what that could be. I don't even want to know what it would be like to go through something so tragic, so horrifying. There's people's lives, and we've got to find ways to tell our stories and help people out, especially through a situation like this. This is, I mean, you don't see stories like this every day, and I don't want to see stories like this every day. I don't even want to see this story, to be honest with you. It's terrible, right? But it's just being lost in the shuffle. It is. I didn't even know about that latest update because all I've seen on social media in the last 24 hours was what was the latest stat line from LeBron James. And great, LeBron scores 35 a night. That's a great storyline. Again, a great athlete, but there's other stories we need to share on the ticker, on whatever single media outlet that is, and we're not sharing that. And that's terrible, especially that story you just mentioned when these are young girls that are going through an experience that I can't even fathom. I honestly can't fathom thinking about that stuff, even imagining what they're going through. But we've got to share these stories and find ways to help out. And the power of the media is huge. It shapes how we think. It shapes what we do in a lot of ways. And we hear a storyline and we hear a story. Maybe if the story is not completely accurate in some instances, and that's not me saying that most reports aren't accurate, right? But we just see that, and that might shape how we think. That might shape what we think about these certain things with this event, this process, this sport. And so the power of media is endless. It's huge. I think we got to understand that we need to use these platforms, understand how important it is, and share these stories and help these families out and these kids out, especially kids. You know how important kids are, and they're our next generation. They're our next wave of people that are eventually going to be leading businesses, running sports teams, being professional athletes, being politicians, being teachers, being educators, whatever the field is, right? We've got to share stories and help people out, especially younger generations.
So
And
how do you
I think,
think that TV shows like Last Chance U help to break down the stigma around mental health issues?
oh, Last Chance U does a great job, especially that last season at Laney College in Oakland. I think because the California junior college system is a lot different than most in terms of there aren't scholarships, right? And in Mississippi, we saw that in Independence, Kansas. There, great job telling those stories, but it's also some of the education's being paid for. At least, of course, they're still junior college and their struggles, especially when you're in a small town, you're away from family. They did a great job with that. But at Laney College, especially in Oakland, saw so many unbelievable stories in there. I actually spoke to one of those athletes. Rajon Wright was in there on Last Chance U from Laney College. His brother, we talked to them. Nashawn Wright, he played at Oregon State. He was featured in there a little bit, but they went through some stuff. Their father, unfortunately, was murdered a few years ago. Those kids, I mean, they had every reason to just fold and quit, right? I mean, can't even imagine what that's like to hear that news, especially he was an innocent bystander and just unfortunately had his life taken right then. And that's, can't even fathom that. But those two kids, their family ended up moving. So instead of living in from East Palo Alto, going to Laney College in Oakland every day, right? That family moved to Stockton. And instead of East Palo Alto to Oakland, which is just a Bay Area commute, you're going to Stockton in the Central Valley. I'm about 25, 30 minutes from Oakland and Livermore. You got to go through the Altamont Pass. You got to go through to Stockton for 45 minutes. You're doing that to Oakland every day, to Laney College, and you're talking about Bay Area traffic, Altamont Pass traffic. You're doing 2.5 hours each way every single day, and you're being a student. You're playing sports. They made that happen. Nashawn Wright's now preparing for the NFL draft. Rajon Wright got a scholarship to Oregon State, and he's playing football there too. They played with each other there for one season last year. They got through that. Dior Scott, a kid from Deer Valley up in Antioch. His story was just a remarkable story, what he shared, just the struggles he had with his dad. And there was a time when I forgot what it was, but his father, unfortunately, from what Dior Scott said, was his father had him dressed like a girl for a day and went to school like that. And the mental health struggles this kid went through every single day of his life was unbelievable. His mom ended up moving to Arkansas. He didn't get to play senior year of high school football at Deer Valley because he was in Arkansas. Okay, living with his mom. Then he ended up playing junior college football at Laney College. He was living in his car for a while, and nobody knew that until the show came out. Then people found out that he's kind of said he was couch surfing. Now he was sleeping in his car for a while. Then he got a work study job, got some places to stay. this kid ended up getting an opportunity to be a walk-on at the University of Hawaii. He got his own bed. He said that first night he was in a bed, he sobbed, he cried because just the power of having a bed was unbelievable to him because of everything he went through. And that kid, his first day in Hawaii too, the coaching staff there took a head coaching job at Washington State. So now it's like, what's he got to? He's got to prove himself to a completely new staff that doesn't know him. Well, guess what happened? After his first season at Hawaii as a walk-on, he just earned a scholarship. I mean, Last Chance U's storytelling for that, especially for that kid, was one of the best stories I think I've ever seen any outlet produced. Credit to Netflix for that story. Anyone that hasn't watched this last season of Last Chance U, I urge you to watch that. Dior Scott's story is remarkably powerful. I mean, because what he would do, he had football, he had class, and at night he was working at Wingstop. Then he was sleeping in his car. Then he was going back to school and football every day. And then to get a chance to where he finally had his own bed in college at Hawaii to earning a scholarship shows that almost anything's possible. And he overcame mental health struggles through just people helping him. And now you see this kid all the time and you see the smile on his face. How do you that not make you want to smile to see that kind of story? I don't even
So
know the guy. I don't even know the guy, and that makes me want to cry because that's such a remarkable story. And I think that storytelling of his mental health struggles was about as powerful and as great as it gets. And Last Chance U does a phenomenal job. And I think that's something we can all learn from.
So other than, I mean, we've mentioned the Players Tribune, the Athletic, and Last Chance U, what other media outlets have you seen trying to approach mental health from an athletics standpoint and doing a good job of it?
I think I mentioned earlier with game day and stuff in Sunday NFL Counts, and I think ESPN's done a better job with some of those stories, especially on their longer winded stories on those Sundays before games or Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays and stuff with college and the NFL. I think they've done a good job with that. NBA's usually got some stories with that too. TNT does a very good job. I know Ernie Johnson does a fantastic job telling stories. If people haven't, also read Ernie Johnson's book. He does a great job just telling stories, what his family's done. But I think TNT does a good job with that. ESPN does. Those are some really good outlets, I would say, that do that good job of telling those storylines. Some other ones I want to think of, there's some local news outlets that'll do good jobs. So obviously I'm in the Bay Area, so I only see my local news outlets, but in other areas too, local news is powerful. And I know newspapers will do a good job without some of those writers, the local news stations as well. Whether you're in West Virginia, it doesn't matter. WBOY or the TV station in Clarksburg, Bridgeport, whatever those ones, they're going to tell different stories too, right? I think local news outlets do a really good job with some of the stuff because they're really involved in the communities. They're in the heart of that stuff, telling a lot of different people's stories, getting their stuff out there. So local news outlets, countless ones of them do a great job. ESPN's doing a much better job at that. Obviously, the Players Tribune, TNT does a good job with that, especially with their basketball stuff. The Athletic, like we mentioned, I think those would be outlets that you see do a really good job, and definitely local news for people. Definitely watch that stuff, read that stuff, see those stories, and support those local news stations because they are doing a very good job getting into the nitty gritty of these localized stories. Maybe it's in your own community of some mental health stuff that people have overcome or things that they're doing to help out. And those are going to be stories that really hit close to home because they're in your region, whether that's in Oakland, California, whether that's in Livermore, and whether that's in Morgantown, whether that's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? So many different areas. So local news stories too. And those local news outlets are going to be great ones for that. I've seen those kinds of stories shared so many times on different local news outlets, just from things I've seen on YouTube, videos that circulate on social media and whatnot.
So how do you think, after being in this West Coast preps mindset for a while, how have you come to embrace storytelling differently now that you're out of college, you've had a, a variety of different jobs in the industry, and now you're trying to create your own platform for the telling of these stories. So how much focus are you putting on the physical sport as opposed to the mental aspect of the sport?
No, I really like to hit both, especially when I talk to student athletes. Sure, I talk about what's made them successful in the sport, of course, right? Especially if they've got a couple of offers. Like, I know I talked to one athlete recently. He's got some offers. He just got his third offer from Colorado State. He's also at Colorado, San Jose State, Jackson Brown. but he's got some great stories too, just mentally and off the field as well, where his father was an All-American lineman at the University of Pittsburgh, actually played in the NFL, appeared in the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, a little over a decade ago, Jackson Brown's father passed away because of colon cancer, right? But his father's motivation and legacy lives on with him every day and just powers him through and everything. Now Jackson Brown's a fantastic student. He's a fantastic athlete. That's a great storyline of just some what a kid's gone through mentally to lose your father, especially when I think he was 6 years old. To go through that every day, I can't imagine lose my father any age, but at 6 years old, and what I think would be kindergarten, first grade for some people, to go through that mental toll. I don't even want to know, but just his story of getting through that is one thing worth sharing. I know that story is going up on our site in a couple of days, talking to him, some other athletes that we've really talked to. I mean, we've had a bunch of them. I mean, I talked to a football coach recently. I should say a couple months ago, but I talk to him all the time from Skyline. He went through some of his own things where there was one day he was laying in his bed just thinking his football career was over, right? He thought that he at one point he just couldn't, maybe there were some grade struggles, academic, whatever it was, but then he was trying to get to San Jose State. Things didn't work out there football wise. Went junior college route, but there was days when he thought that his football career was over. All of a sudden, what happens? Not too long later, University of Toledo comes calling. He gets a Division I scholarship, plays at Toledo, and I think they beat Michigan when he was there, if I'm right. I mean, the
That's
things that
amazing.
he went through mentally, now he's helping out kids in many big ways in Oakland, doing great things. He started a Living the Dream program where they're helping kids career path wise. They're doing virtual college tours with a lot of different universities, helping them find schools that fit them, maybe not just athletically, but academically as well, for a great major. Trying to just talk with different business executives, a lot of different things. Or that Cassie Taylor, that academic advisor I told you about, her mental health struggles, but what she does to help out kids, and how that it's never too late to get help, and there's always a way to get through something and power through and become, at least reach your full potential, right? Those are some stories. Jackson Brown was a great one. I've talked to some kids. I know Skyline football, I know I mentioned one of their teammates unfortunately was shot and killed. Their players talked about how they've gotten through that situation and how they've overcome that. They're using his legacy and they're succeeding in the classroom and in school. And there's so many situations of this stuff of mentally we talk about. I know we had that person on our podcast where we talked about mental health, like I mentioned earlier, but I always like to talk to kids about what are some driving forces for you in life? What are some things that have really made you successful in the classroom? Maybe there's something cool you're doing off the field of play too, but I like to really hit motivational things, and some off the field stuff's really important too, because the sports aspect, of course, is important, especially if you're trying to get to the next level, right? A college is going to want to know, are you really good at basketball? Can you shoot a three-pointer, right? Can you rebound the basketball well? Can you throw a football 40 yards accurately? But there's a lot of other things that I really like to tell, and I really get joy just hearing some of these stories of just what Jackson Brown's overcome and seeing what he's done to get 3 college scholarships to some really good programs. San Jose State just won a Mountain West title for the first time in years. Colorado's was going to play in the Pac-12 championship until COVID hit. So USC stepped in their place instead and played Oregon. But then Colorado State's had some really good teams in the past too. So it's those kinds of stories, just seeing what kids have done, what they've overcome to be successful in the classroom, to get a 3.8 GPA, to get a 4.0, but to also be a really good soccer player, softball player, runner, football player, etc. I mean, it's endless, but I love seeing what kids have overcome to be successful. And that motivates me every day too, to be honest. I learned so many things from these interviews. I mean, even before this, when I was working in Texas and South Texas, I was talking to the district champs that year. They honestly had no business being district champs because their head football coach, and they'll say this because they had no business being there because of things they went through. Their head football coach was a high school dropout. Okay. Then he ended up being a campus athletic coordinator, a head football coach, making, I think, 6 figures every year, doing a fantastic job for, since he was doing things where when his son was born with his wife overnight when he was working at oil rigs, but also they were middle of the night, their kid would sleep in their car while they're being like janitors, cleaning up places in business in the middle of the night. He became a football coach and became really successful, became a district champion head coach in his second year at the school. Their quarterback lost his father, unfortunately, was arrested for killing a guy in a bar fight and got 40 plus years for that. And that kid was the happiest kid I ever met. He had great grades and a fantastic quarterback. I mean, I never saw that kid without a smile on his face. Right. I mean, that was a powerful story, just meeting him and sharing that. The running back who broke the city's all time rushing record lost his father. All of a sudden, I forgot what the illness was, but all of a sudden he was paralyzed in a lot of his body, then tragically passed away. That kid, Brian Benavides, got really successful. It's the city's all time leading rusher. There was one athlete that lived in hotels for a while, right? And then his stepdad came around and did some great things for them. And there were so many of those stories. And then there was a story I told recently out of Richmond as well. This football player, he and his brother, they remember living in going from motel to hotel for a while. He just lost, unfortunately, he lost some family members to gun violence in Vallejo over the last few months. And then he ended up just signing his letter of intent. So there's so many stories of what people have overcome mentally and in their personal lives to being successful. And to be honest, that motivates and inspires me every single day.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think that the impact, or what, I guess, what do you think the impact of telling these positive success stories is on the people who read them?
I think it's a really positive impact, especially for people that know those individuals, right? They may not have known some of that stuff about the kid, and they're like, wow, you really went through some of that. And look at you now. Look at what you've done. I have no excuses in my life. If I'm having a bad day or if something didn't go right for me at work or whatever it is, or my email stopped working or my phone's not working for 30 minutes, right? Those are such many struggles, but maybe sometimes in the day, it's natural to get frustrated from that, right? But you read one of those stories and what a kid's gone through and you're like, wow, that's unbelievable. I got no reason to be upset just with this mini thing thrown at me with whatever it is and not working for a little bit, right? But a lot of people that has a positive impact just on the people reading them. You see people share those stories a lot of times. They're like, wow, I'm really rooting for this kid now. You see those kinds of comments a lot. Or they're sharing that story with their team. And they're not even affiliated with that school. And they're sharing that story with their team of, hey, read that story. Listen to what they had to say. Let's use this as a way to motivate ourselves too. Because look at what this kid went through living in motels for a while. Look at what he's done signing this letter of intent. We all can learn from this and be successful and still find a way to go to the next level or find a venture outside of sports as well that suits us and be successful at that too. And you see the positive impact on these things is huge. And even just sharing them, when we've shared stories about kids, they'll share that story to a college and that college is all of a sudden very interested in them. They're like, wow, okay. Didn't realize you had some of that and you were also involved with that. They share that and it helps them get that contact and maybe eventually they get an offer from that too. So it goes back to my point earlier talking about the power of media is so endless,
On the
right? It shapes how a lot of
on
people
the
think.
other side, when these athletes try to use their platforms to speak out against the mental health stigma or something that they're going through, and the perception from these people who are the majority of fans who are reading this is negative, and then all of this negative backlash comes out, potentially, I mean, it's obviously dependent on the story, but some people are wondering, why did it take you so long to talk about this? Or why do you think we should care? You're still playing. Like, it's your job to entertain me. So I don't care about what happens to you off the court. So what's the impact of talking, of finding the courage to talk about these things that you're going through with a media outlet, and then the media outlet telling your story, and then you as the athlete getting backlash?
It's really sad to see that too, because a lot of times people look at these athletes, and in college too, we look at these college athletes as they have to entertain us. They got to put their body on the line every week, or a kid opts out, or whatever it is. They speak out about something, and they're getting sent death threats for goodness sakes. That's a 20-year-old kid putting in a lot of their time so you could be entertained on a Saturday afternoon. I don't think we understand what they're doing the entire week to really do that. Sure, maybe a lot of us are working throughout the week too, working 40, 50, 60 hours, whatever it is, but understand the sacrifices these people are making too. We got to humanize these athletes more. That's something I've said a lot the last few years. We just look at them as, hey, when's the next time you can score 30 points for me? Why didn't you play well in that NBA Finals game? Why couldn't you catch that pass? And we just bash these guys, and they open up about their personal lives and their stories, and we're like, why should we care? You're an entertainer. No, they're a human just like the rest of us. They are, and a lot of times they're traveling a week or two on end without seeing their families. They got to be in a bubble. That NBA bubble, they were in that for a couple months and they're stuck in a hotel room. Sure, they got to play basketball, but don't forget they were away from their families for a long time, right? I think we forget to mention the human part of these athletes. And then when you share some of these stories, mental health things, whatever it is, personal stuff, you see that backlash. And now with social media and message boards and forums, anyone can hide behind a keyboard, right? People just, they can spew off their mouth and say something, but a lot of these times, and it's hard not to notice some of that stuff when you're an athlete or you read some of those negative comments. That's impossible for even the most famous of ones to not see. It's impossible for LeBron to probably not see some of that, or presidents, or whoever it is, right? And it's just, it's impossible for people not to see that stuff. And we just got to understand too sometimes that these people spewing off, they're jealous, to be honest, or they're, I know you hear the phrase that they're stuck in their mother's basement or their father's basement. You hear that a lot of times, but they're just spewing off to you on Twitter. They're spewing off on a message board. I don't, a lot of people that are saying this would never say it to your face. Instead, if they saw you, they'd be like, hey, can I get an autograph? Can I get an autograph? Just trying to benefit themselves, right? But we got to understand that these athletes are human beings, just like the rest of us. They have families to take care of. We don't know what they went through to get to, like LeBron James. Sure, is he a freak of an athlete? Yes. But did he have any business getting to this point? No, because of his childhood was crazy. He went through a lot of different struggles and look where he is now, right? He went through some stuff and people just look at him as an athlete. People just look at Steph Curry as an athlete or a pawn for their entertainment. They look at that for Tom Brady, all these great athletes in college or the pros. And people are with keyboards now and social media, people are, it's so easy to click send and say something and not even have your face show, or they even have that basic Twitter thing, or they have that turtle as their profile picture, right? And people are so easy, it's spewing off on social media, unfortunately, and saying stuff to them, and all that backlash, especially in comments. Like the comments I see on news stories on Facebook are, oh my goodness. I feel sorry for some of these people for even thinking that. It's unbelievable the things you read on there every single day. It's all of a sudden you just see one story posted and people are getting into some big arguments in there and just going at the athletes or the individuals and the maybe news stories as well. And it's just like, oh my goodness, but we got to humanize these athletes more and understand, be proud of them for sharing that story. Because in a lot of instances going through adversity, it's hard. It's hard for a lot of people to open up to even their wives or their husbands after 20 years of certain struggles, right? Because everybody's different. Some people might be very open, but a lot of people also aren't, and that's okay. That's okay to not, to take a while to open up, and that takes a lot of strength to open up. For we got to understand that too. It takes a lot of strength to open up about a tough time period in your life, something you went through, a tragedy you went through, and to open up about any of that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of strength, and we got to applaud people for doing that and understanding how powerful that is. Sure, it may have taken a lot of strength to have the best game of your life, but it took a lot more strength to open up about your adversity and your mental health.
How do you think that paying student athletes will change the narrative surrounding who they are off the field?
I think it'll be good for student athletes to kind of benefit from their likeness, right? Especially because of the hours they're putting in. You see the money that fluctuates in college sports, and more the TV deals are seen are absolutely ridiculous. How much money gets poured into it. That's great, but I think you're going to have a lot of times too. People already say, hey, you get a full ride scholarship. Why are you complaining? Now, I also think that we've got to see now people are going to be like, you don't just get a full ride scholarship, you're getting paid too. And then people, I think honestly, more people are going to start saying, especially in comments, well, you're getting a full ride scholarship, you're getting paid. Why are you complaining? Why are you talking? Just focus on sports. When in reality, they're human beings just like the rest of us. And I think pain will be a good thing for a lot of reasons, but we've got to really understand that I think there's going to be more backlash, to be honest with you, with some of the stuff. Because the scholarships you see all the time, people are like, well, you get a full ride. Why are you complaining? But I'm thinking, you don't understand. We saw when we were in college, the hours a day these kids are putting in to play that sport, that travel, especially West Virginia, that travel for Big 12 volleyball.
It's
Heck,
insane.
they're driving to Pittsburgh an hour and 15 minutes every day to fly to Texas for a match. Then they got to come back. You're getting back to Morgantown at what, 4 or 5 a.m. Any sport, then you got to go to school.
Yeah.
If you have a 9:30 or 8:30 a.m. class, I've seen that. I remember one time I saw a basketball player. I was walking down from my dorm to class. for an 8:30 class. I saw a basketball player, and the night before they're playing, I think at Texas Tech, the next day they're back walking to their 8:30 class, and he looked exhausted. I'm I think we've got to understand too that sure, maybe you're getting money out of it and you're getting scholarships and whatnot, and that's great, cool. But I think it's going to create more backlash for student athletes, unfortunately, because of now that you're getting paid and you're getting scholarships, that you're even more of just an entertainer for us to watch on TV every day.
So let's talk about these athletes talking on TV to specific interviews or post-game interviews with the sideline reporter. And the sideline reporter says, "How'd you feel?" And the athlete says, "We won. I feel awesome." But there's so much more. It's like when you see with someone in the street and you're like, "Hey, how are you?" And they're like, "Hey, I'm good. How are you?" And you're like, "I'm good." And then you just walk on past. You just keep walking, and there's not really a deep conversation. So, like in our pre-interview, for example, we were talking about alternate questions that sideline reporters could ask to bring forth this conversation as opposed to a yes no answer. So, what are some of those alternate questions that could, from a reporter's perspective, add more to the game broadcast?
Yeah, I think silent reporters, they a lot of that goes into too. They do a great job with injury reports. They do a great job getting some of those details or something happened on the sideline. They're right there to hear what the coach said. But questions a lot of times we do hear it asked, how do you feel? How did that feel? Of course we know someone hit a game winning three, that felt great, right? How could that not feel great to kick a game winning field goal or throw a game winning touchdown pass with 20 seconds left? But there's a lot more to it. How did you get to that point? You call a timeout with 20 seconds left, and all of a sudden you guys had two big plays that got you into field goal range. What happened in that timeout? Ask what happened there, what changed, what was your message to the team, and how do they respond to that? What did you guys see from the defense that allowed you to open up opportunities? We noticed, hey, the quarterback called an audible at the line of scrimmage. Why does he have that power to do it? What makes you trust him like that? And what made you decide what kind of went through that thought process? Maybe you talked to the quarterback after the game. What made you audible? What did you see in the defense that got you to that point? That's going to be a really good answer. He's going to break that down to where the viewers can really learn about the game more, right? So the next time they watch that sport, football, whatever it is, they're thinking, wow, okay, I think I see what he's talking about now. That makes sense. Maybe they'll audible like that again here. What's the offense going to do is in this situation, right? But instead we're asking, how did they feel? Of course, we know how you felt after when it came. That's obvious answer. How I don't know how you went, especially if everybody's jumping on top of you. Of course, you feel great, but what went into that moment? What went into that thought process of calling those plays? What went into that thought process of, hey, maybe earlier in the game they were now 21 points and they came back. What did you see on that play? What changed for you guys at halftime? What was the coach's message? Did teammates speak up? Did leaders speak up? How did the overall mood change, and what went on from there? Did you guys dial something up different offensively, defensively that got you back into the game? But instead of just asking, how do you feel? What went into that play call? What went into calling that timeout there instead of there? What was said in that timeout? Why did you guys change the play call there at the last second? Why did you decide to call that play? But all of a sudden it really worked. What did you see in the defense? Instead of just asking, how did you feel? There's a lot more questions, and some of that's probably from upstairs, just kind of what they're telling you to ask as well at halftime or post game, whatever it is. But there's other questions to get deeper answers, like what was your thought process? What did you see from that defense? And they're going to give you a really good answer. There's going to be a lot of people, especially if you ask Lincoln Riley, probably after game at Oklahoma, post game, silent interview, whatever it is, they have a big play to win the game from Spencer Rattler, or the running back has a big run. What did you see? And you're going to get a long winded, really deep and explanatory answer about what went into winning that ball game.
So what medium do you think does the best job at covering these special interest stories? Do you think it translates better into print or long form broadcast stories? I mean, what what do you think are podcasts, radio shows? I mean, Sirius XM. What aspect do you think does the best job at translating all of these special interest stories from these athletes into feature stories that people will listen to or read?
No, I think print does a good job, especially if it's online because there's less of a word count, right? The newspapers are going to have a word count. It's got to be this length because maybe there's an advertisement here, advertisement there. Sure, online you're going to have word counts, so that can be as long as you want technically on that web page. You can just keep scrolling down. A newspaper, you're limited to 12 pages, 16 pages, 24, whatever it is for that day. But online print is going to be really good for that stuff. I've read, especially in the athletic, how many great stories have I read about that every single day? Every single day I go through on my app and I'm just like, oh my goodness, another fantastic story I have to read. I read that, it took 10 minutes. Or I think a lot of us, I know that story on Teddy Allen circulated online, that former West Virginia player at Nebraska, what he went through in his life. And that was, I read that for 15 minutes the other night, and that was a fantastic long form feature story. I think everybody needs to read about just Teddy Allen's upbringing, how he kind of bounced back to have one of the best games in Nebraska basketball history now after going from West Virginia to Wichita to junior college to Nebraska. That documentaries are fantastic with that too. You see that in broadcast too, but of course in TV, you're obviously relegated to length when it comes to commercials, and that's not on the reporter. That's just the way it's unfortunately going to go. But they get a lot of good stories in that X amount of time, like I mentioned on game day or Sunday NFL Countdown or local news. But documentaries do a fantastic job of it being really long. Podcasts, a lot of times there's no requirement for length, and podcasts are so much bigger nowadays, and there's such an open forum of people to talk about their lives and what they've gone through. So I would say online, print's really doing a good job of that. Documentaries and podcasts are some really good forums that I've really tuned into, at least for me personally, that I've seen some of the best longer feature stories shared.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I'm a very visual learner, so I really like watching things, but I wish there were more documentaries out. I mean, The Last Dance came out, but I wish there were more sports psych specific documentaries that were talking about these things as opposed to physical wins.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good thing for us to see more of. And The Last Dance probably wasn't even meant to talk about some sports psych stuff, but you heard about Michael Jordan's mindset. That was ridiculously crazy. I mean, his mindset was unlike anything I've ever seen, but that's why he went 6-0 in the finals, right? But besides maybe seeing that for a little bit on that documentary, you don't see a whole lot of sports psych documentaries. And I think those would be a great thing to watch. And maybe there's a way those things can be told more on, especially a platform like Netflix. Maybe it's a Netflix exclusive, right? Maybe an ESPN 30 for 30 does something like that. But there's a lot of ways we can do that. And I wish we had more of those shared. And it's cool to learn about the history of a certain season or a certain franchise, but also the sports psych things and some of those stories. Like, I would really love to learn more about Kevin Love's story. I know he shared it. I think he got an SB4, I believe. I want to say he did, but I'd love to get more of a longer form story of that too, and stories like that, and learn more about just those stories, just sports psych in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the more we talk about these mental health issues, I mean, there's a difference though between mental health like depression and anxiety and then performance aspects like you're getting your time on your 40-yard dash down or adding to your points scored or setting new records. I mean, those are two kind of different avenues. So we can talk about depression and anxiety issues, but there's so much more to sports psychology than just the clinical side. And especially when you're talking to elite athletes, the performance aspect is a huge part of their job and what they're focusing on. And I just don't see that being talked about really at all in the normal media because everything is like a game recap here, a game recap here, a feature maybe here, but there's nothing really specific to performance psych.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And with a lot of these, especially professional organizations, they have a lot of people working on mental performance every single day with you. I'm sure if you ask, maybe that's their PR representative for the team, media representative, whomever it is, they'd be more than happy to get you in contact, because that might be the first time that that specific individual, whomever that is sharing that story and what they do and helping benefit mental performance. You talk to them, then you talk to some of the athletes, really what that person does for them. that's a great storyline, and you'll get access to that in a lot of franchises, a lot of organizations, because they're really focused on that nowadays. And that would be a story I would love to see shared more and get that mental performance side, because a lot of mental performance has to go into running a 4.27 40, right? You got to have mental performance to even train for that. But we just go through what's the physical thing. How much are you squatting now? Are you squatting 525 pounds now? Right, cool. All fun and games. That's impressive as heck to do that. But what's the mental performance side? And there's more to just the clinical, like you said, and there's people you can talk to in every single organization that'll sit down with you for an interview and help you get a story and point you to other people you can talk to, maybe other doctors that they know that they can talk to you for the story. You can talk to athletes just about what those individuals have done for them and help them really increase their mental performance and put that to its absolute maximum potential every single day.
Yeah, I'm working on a story right now about the Rays organization and the impact of their mental skills and their mental performance department, because they're doing an amazing job at the Rays about implementing sports psychology principles into their everyday gameplay. And so I'm doing a story, it's coming out, I believe, in 2 weeks. And I interviewed a woman who works in their player development team and then one of the major leaguers. And he was talking about the impact that the Rays put on sports psych, and how when he was playing with the Cardinals, it wasn't there. Like and at the time, like, he spent 7 years in the Cardinals minor leagues. So he had ample time to work on these physical skills, but the organization itself wasn't prioritizing those. So then when he got to the Rays, he was like, oh my gosh, they have, now I know what I've been feeling. I know how to verbalize it. And I know that there are these people that I specifically talk to about these issues. And it was just not something that the Cardinals had prioritized. So it stuck out to him, and he was so open to talking about his struggles and the differences between these two organizations who are both in the majors.
Yeah, that's a really good story too. I want to see that story when it comes out, but I think that's really important. Just he had
Yeah.
someone to verbalize, right? Especially the Rays. Imagine, like you said, they do a good job. They probably got people on site you can talk to every single day to help you through. Maybe they have a therapist on site, maybe someone on retainer, or whatever it is that's really helping you out to talk to somebody. But that's something that is obviously helped his mental performance, and it's probably made him an even better athlete than he already was. Right, he's made it to the pros. He's made it to these organizations like the Cardinals or Rays. So he's obviously reached top of anyone's game. But I'm sure just getting that mental performance stuff and be able to verbalize stuff made him even better than he already was. There's a reason now why the Rays, with very little money, are so successful year in and year out. They have Oakland A's money pretty much, right? But they're still successful every year, and they're doing great things for their players with that mental stuff that I think more teams can use. And just having people on site to talk to you, make you feel comfortable about that, and just make you feel comfortable at verbalizing your emotions, your feelings, things you've been through. And I'm sure going through the minor league life every day, that's going to take a toll on anyone mentally, because that's not an easy lifestyle. Bus rides, overnight things. You're not doing charter flights, and sure, even those charters for pro teams, major league teams, still not isn't easy, because you're late night flights. You're doing double headers. You're traveling from one city to the next in the middle of the night for another series. But I'm sure just those long bus rides and that training in the minor leagues probably took a toll too.
Yeah, I mean, he was 7 years in the minor league system. So many people get cut after like 2 or 3 years. And the fact that he was not only able to spend 7 years perfecting his craft, but then he ended up pitching in the World Series. I mean, it's an incredible story of mental resilience to stay in this system for so long,
It is,
and then finally have it pay off.
and I bet there were probably times when he doubted himself. When you're 7 years in the minors, it had to be. Everyone has those moments where you doubt yourself for a minute or two, and you're just like, "Am I really going to make it? Is this really what I want to do with my life? Am I actually going to ever go onto the big stage?" But he kept believing in himself. He still had that one driving force somewhere in the back of his mind that led him to this point. He pitched in a World Series. That's that's a heck of a story. When you're stuck in the minors for 7 years, going from small town to small town, maybe Best Western to Best Western, good hotels, right? But it's not the same as what you're going to get in other levels and you're doing bus rides all the time and you're not getting maybe the same meals and the same training every day. And he went 7 years in the minor leagues to eventually get there. I've seen that with players too, where they get out of the minors at 32 and they finally made it to the big leagues. They stuck it out. They trusted the process. And for some people, it takes longer. It does. Some people it takes longer. Some people it might take a year to get up there, but not everybody's Mike Trout, right? And that's okay if you're not Mike Trout. We're all different. That's fine. You don't. Not everybody has to be Mike Trout to be successful in their life and be at the top of their game and playing a World Series. And these people did. They trusted the process. They stuck to it. Found ways to keep themselves going mentally and physically, and then just with that strength they had in their minds, those dreams did come true. And you're stepping on the mound in a World Series. I can't even imagine what that feeling's like.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that story. I think it'll come out in 2 weeks, but it's gonna be an awesome one. I'm really excited. All right, is there anything else that you think that I did not touch on? I mean, this episode is going to be about the representation of sports psychology in the media. And I think that we've talked a lot about how not only how local news perceives it, but also national news and syndicates that are not really focused on mental health, how they're kind of coming around to telling these stories of adversity. So is there anything else that you think that we should touch on before we conclude?
I think just the same point I go back to is humanize athletes and not just professionally, collegially, but let's also talk about high school student athletes and youth sports and all these avenues because what kids are our next generation, right? There's a lot of high school kids struggling in this world right now, especially when they're stuck at home and sure they've finally got sports back, but how do they possibly overcome those last 11 months in California or some other states to power through to today? That took a lot of strength to do virtual workouts and do socially distanced workouts. I'm gonna be honest, I saw a practice last Thursday. I didn't the way I saw socially distanced practice, I'm like, there's no way football's coming back. Then the next day, just some good news happened to come out where they're saying, hey, these outdoor sports can come back. And it's like, wow, okay. These kids that stuck it out, more power to you for what made you decide to still believe in that. How there were probably a lot of times where you could have just said, I doubt this is gonna happen. Why should I keep coming up? Why should I keep showing up to this practice when we're doing the same thing every day? Some schools didn't even have weren't even throwing footballs in practice until last week. They were running routes and they were just doing the throwing motion, but they didn't have a football. So
Yeah.
what did I think maybe also sharing kids stories about just how did you get through this time period? And I'm sure that could help out so many people because I'm sure there's adults feeling the same way of just being stuck on Zoom calls every day or being stuck working from home. Share some of these kid stories and show the strength that they went through to not even see their friends for almost a year to sit on Zooms and sit in bedrooms and staying strong to power through to good news eventually coming because those are some really powerful stories too because when you're 16 17 years old it's another prime age to think that maybe this thing's not going to happen. And I doubted sports coming back in some instances too and saw these kids kept powering through and that was more powerful to me than anything. And I think not just college pros but let's share just some high school sports stuff and some youth sports stuff and share what these kids are going through every single day especially now to still make their dreams come true and see how kids are still their mental performance is still staying strong to get to go to college at any level and get their education maybe paid for, somewhat paid for, they're just being a walk on, whatever it is, and getting that education and seeing what they do the rest of their lives. I think we can do that at every level.
Yeah. Um and I think that's it. That's all the questions I have for you. I'll DM you or email you when this comes out. It'll be, I think, 4 weeks from now. I have a stockpile of episodes that I'm putting out every week.
Hey, 4 weeks from now, I'll have high school football to see. Yes. So, ah,
That's I'm in such a better mood though, honestly. Like it's sunny outside. I'm ready to just get down to business.
I feel that. Oh, God, it's finally something.
Yeah, I mean, it's been rainy and gross and snowy here for a long time. And I took a walk yesterday. So good. It was
Uh,
so good.
been such good weather. Uh,
But yeah, I think that's it. I think I'm gonna stop recording.
oh, sweet.